to the end of the hall or something like that, with them holding on me all the time. But I wasn't percolating real well. Couldn't talk very well.
Paralyzed then would be the appropriate
certainly
term.
partially. I don't think I was ever totally paralyzed, but I've got one weak leg today that gives out on me every once in a while. My memory's not what it once was. But I'm in pretty good shape for the shape I'm in, to tell you the truth.
I remember seeing you, and this was 91, right?
Yeah, 91.
You were in a wheelchair for a period of time,
I was in a wheelchair. Jean made me, she'd put the wheelchair up under my computer and make me go to typing on the computer. And at that time, I had to do it a finger at a time and hold my finger, and it would still get off. Sometimes I couldn't get on the C, or I'd just move on this side and then that side.
What would be amazing is to have had a video of you then and then a video of you now.
Yeah.
People would literally...
Probably a good thing you don't, though, because one thing about a stroke is if you've got any meanness in you, it kind of makes it come out. You don't hold back very often.
Some of those times when you were impatient a little bit.
There was some outbursts, and my wife left the room crying many a time, and then of course I felt the worst I ever felt in my life. And I would tell her, and she still doesn't believe it. I'll tell her again. I didn't mean to say that. It just came out. And I about got control of myself now, unless you make me really mad.
Yeah, with the emotions that were going on at that time.
I will say this, Chip. I had a mind all the time. I knew what was happening to me all the time and who was doing what and saying what. I just couldn't respond to them.
You literally had, you couldn't speak.
Well, it was very hard for me to speak. And we got in the hospital in Birmingham there for 2 or 3 nights. I dictated notes to Jean as what to tell the office that they needed to do, voluminous notes. I've seen them since then. Half the time she couldn't make out what I was saying, and I'd get so mad at her because she didn't understand what I was trying to say, you know.
I can see where that'd be terribly frustrating.
Anyway, those were...
Well, again, it would be amazing. You could probably sell anything medically, so if people could see you then and now and say this particular medical thing did it,
well, I know you got to get
up.
You got to get up and go.
Yeah.
And
the determination and the discipline and support of family.
I felt all my life that God had His hand on my shoulder, and I know He did then. It's hard for me to talk about it.
Yeah.
But my children helped me, my wife helped me, my friends helped me. Judge Springer came to my house every day. Jimmy Rouse came to my house every day. It took me a while to dawn on me that they think I'm going to die. they wouldn't be here. They wouldn't be here every day if they didn't think I was going to die. I ain't going to die.
Let me jump off that traumatic story a little bit. Like you've got a kind of a funny story that, well, it wasn't funny at the time. That happened at the lake.
Well, times are getting a little better for us in the 70s, I expect it was, and where we had to watch every penny for a long time, we began to buy a few little things that we liked, and I liked to fish in those days, and I had bought me several fancy reels and rods, but one in particular was my absolute favorite. I really can't even remember what kind it was. It was Shakespeare rod, I'm pretty sure, but it cost about $150, which it was a lot of money in those days. It was my pride and joy. My daughter Sally came up to the lake with a boyfriend, and he wanted to fish, and I didn't know he had never fished before, so I took him out in the boat, and do you know how to fish? Yes, sir. You like to cast some? Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, you hold this right here, and I showed him just exactly how to do it. We went 75 feet of water. I remember it like it was yesterday. And he cast that thing, and he really had a lot of wrist action and everything else perfectly. But I evidently had failed to tell him you hold on to the thing because it sailed way out and went down in the lake, and we've never recovered that.
So there is a $150 rod probably still somewhere at the bottom of that.
Probably so. In not too good a shape, I expect. But
And
it took all I could do then not to lose my temper. But
I was going to say, I heard you were pretty good-natured in spite of what happened.
Not inside, but outside, maybe.
Okay. Let me jump on. You've got a number of things that you did in the 50s, especially sort of your beginning with JC's and Rotary Club and civic things that you did that I know you enjoyed a lot. Tell me some of that.
Well, I got into JC's right out of Huntington, I think, in 1951, probably 50 or 51. And I met a lot of people in there that I had never known before, hadn't grown up with in Montgomery. And 3 or 4 of us are still very close friends. We were all president of JC's consecutively, and I don't remember what the order was, but Lawyer Bill Moore has been a lifetime friend. Yo Daddy Oakley Melton has been a lifetime friend. Judge Curtis Spring, a lifetime friend. And I could name a lot of others. Mm-hmm. Those were great days. The best experience I ever had in the JC's was we put on projects to raise money. And our projects historically ended up losing money. Bill Moore came up with the idea one time, let's bring Hank Williams and have a homecoming for Hank. Well, to tell you the truth, I'd never heard of Hank Williams. But we got enthusiastic about it, so we got Hank booked up. And my brother-in-law, Walter Osfeld, and I were the chairman of the finance committee. So we had to look at the money. Well, Hank wanted like $2,500 to appear.
Back then?
Yeah, that was big money, you know. We finally cut him down to $1,500 because we were going to present his mother with a bouquet of roses, and that appealed to him. And this was going to be homecoming for Hank. Also, we came up with a great idea to have it as the first event in the Coliseum, the Agricultural Coliseum in Montgomery.
Had just opened up?
Just for that event. Nothing had ever been held in that before.
Okay.
In fact, it was not complete. With the result that when you sang, when Hank sang, his music went on out the open eaves. It wasn't closed in. And we would, oh, well, I got to tell you this first. We didn't sell half a dozen tickets, it didn't seem like to me, prior to his performance. Where are we going to come up with this money? Well, we had already more or less agreed among ourselves. It was 10 or 12 of us that was somehow going to pay a portion of it, and we going to get him paid. Sunday morning, I believe the concert was Sunday afternoon. Sunday morning, we go out to the Coliseum, and the pickup trucks were coming from every direction that you can imagine. And we had thousands of people there who had not bought tickets in advance, of course. Our Cokes, which we'd ordered enough, we thought, for plenty, they gave out quickly, and we started selling ice for $1
just a cup of ice.
But as Hank began to sing, oh, he demanded his money ahead of time. Walter and I and 1 or 2 others who had something to do with money, we were down underneath the Coliseum, and I got to hand Hank his money, and he shook his hand. And it was only at that moment I realized how drunk he actually was. And then I found out that he was drunk all the time. And it wasn't long after that he was killed in an automobile. I mean, died in an automobile or something like that. But I got that memory of handing him the money. When he started singing, you couldn't hear anything. There got to be a murmur in the crowd. And so we thought it was made a lot of sense to take off our JC armbands and meld into the crowd. We were about to get run out of town.
Because of the open...
You couldn't hear was Hank singing. Nobody could hear. There wasn't any back up here. The music just kept on going.
Would go out those open, I know what you're talking about, Coliseum.
So that happened. Well, there wasn't ever an uprising. Walter and I went home. We lived together in a duplex that we had bought together. And we had the money. It was all cash. It was in a paper sack. There was over $10,000. Now, we had never, in those days, we hadn't even heard of anybody ever having that much money. Walter and I slept nervously all over the weekend, because we had to keep the money under our beds until the banks opened.
On Monday.
And the JCs lived on that money for a long time, but that was one of the, I think your daddy was a JC in those days. I can't exactly remember who was there and who wasn't, but yeah, I think he was. But that's probably,
I've never heard that story.
That's probably the greatest single event that the JCs ever put on.
But the idea is the folks that really came didn't buy tickets ahead of time. Anyway.
They just didn't buy any tickets. We had no advance sale, just almost at all.
And over $10,000.
Yeah, and I've forgotten what the tickets were. I don't know whether $1 or $2. I just don't remember. Yeah. But it wasn't much. Probably $1, and that was about all you could get. Okay. But $10,000 in a paper sack is lots of dollars.
Oh man, I could see that's a great story. Rotary Club. I know you were.
Well, wasn't long after I was in the JCs. I was taking it. My daddy had been a Rotarian all his life, and he took me in the Rotary Club. Asked me if I wanted to be in there, and I, oh yeah, Dad, I went. Well, I was 20-something, about 15 years too young to be in the Rotary Club at that time, really, because most of them were up in their 50s or older than that. So for a long time, I was, in fact, the youngest Rotarian. Not anymore. We had some good time there. Gene and I went to 2 international conventions. I went to another international convention. We made a lot of good friends in Rotary. My good friend Jimmy Rouse, who I had never known before, and I got to be friends in Rotary, and we're still friends to this day. I mean, calling on the telephone friend, visiting friend. I mean, you just a close friendship that was developed then. I think I was the youngest president that Rotary had since its very, very early days, and I don't think anybody has been any younger than I was since then. Although my son Thomas became president of Rotary, he was also a young president, but he wasn't quite as young as I was.
And what year? Are we talking about the 50s? You said still.
That I was president?
Yeah, about the.
It's been a long time ago.
It probably was.
Well, I was about, as I recall, I was about 33 or something like that, and I'm 71 now, so that's been a long time ago. We had some good days in Rotary there, and I'm still a member, although I don't go very often anymore because after I was sick, I couldn't go for so long. It just kind of got out of the habit of going.
Well, I know also during that time you started your tradition over there. What's that school over there?
Auburn?
Somewhere.
You're talking about where the War Eagles hang out?
You've got some deep roots over there. Tell
My
me
daddy
about
didn't
that.
go to college. My daddy couldn't afford to go to college, but he could help when some of his brothers came along. And he had 2 brothers that went to Auburn, and he was always an Auburn man. As long as I can remember, he was all Auburn. And he would take me to football games when I was little. Auburn didn't have a stadium until 1939, I think it was, and they played some games in Montgomery every year, 1 or 2 games usually, and they played in Columbus, Georgia, and they played anywhere. They didn't have any home games because they didn't have a home stadium. I went to the first game that they had a stadium, which was, I think it was 1939 or maybe 37, somewhere right in there. They played the University of Florida and they beat them, and I can remember that little stadium. I think it had maybe 11,000, 12,000 seats or something like that, but Auburn was proud of that stadium. Some years later, my brother-in-law graduated from Auburn, and the second year that Suge Jordan came to Auburn, I don't remember the years, they decided to sell season tickets. Well, Walter, being an alumnus, had rights to 4 season tickets. And between Walter and me and Daddy, we finally came up with enough money to buy us 4 season tickets. We've been and they were right on the 50-yard line, section 29. We've been sitting in those seats ever since. The stadium has been rebuilt. They cut off the stadium right at our, we're now on the last row in the original stadium.
On the lower deck.
If they had cut it 1 row lower, we wouldn't have had a seat there anymore. Everybody who was seated above us lost their seats. But we managed to hold on to ours. And one time, Auburn sent us a letter, sent Walter a letter, we're going to have to move y'all. We get these tickets available. Well, when we joined that thing, there was a verbal, at least, agreement that we would always have our seats. So Walter goes over to Auburn, argues the case. They go back in the files, and they find that indeed they do not have the right to move us out of our seats. As a result of that, the student body sits very close to where our seats are now. That's what they wanted our seats for, I think. I'm not going this year. This will be the first year I've given Walter my ticket rights back. It just got, last year was, the last several years had been taking too much out of us to go over there. So I just
kept going though?
Until last year. I never missed a game. I didn't think I'd ever, when I had my stroke, I said, I'll never see another Auburn football game. They got me over there, and they somehow got me in my seat, and I don't think I ever missed. Maybe I missed one game as a result of my stroke, but not many.
Well, you've seen some great ones, and I know in reading your biography sketch, talking about after your dad had died, seeing games.
Oh gosh, Dad, I don't remember exactly when the last game he saw was, but there was probably 20,000 folks there. And he thought that was just the greatest thing there ever was.
For him to see 85,000
Yeah, and say, Walter and I don't know how many times we said, golly, 85,000 folks there, hopefully winning the game, but even losing the game. I said, God, I wish Daddy could live to see this day, because he wouldn't have believed that stadium when it's lighted up and full at night. And that's a very pleasant memory.
Yeah. Some things that some family would know, but maybe not some of your general friends. You've had experience in computers that go way back. I want you to tell me about some of that, and then I want you to tell me about your experience as an auctioneer. I don't know what you call it, auctioneer? Or,
well, my experience in the auction business, anyway.
Yeah, in the auction business. Tell me about that.
You want to hear that or the computers?
You go with either one. Doesn't make any difference.
In 1943, I believe it was, I was 16 years old. And I decided I needed to get me a job in the summertime. So I was hired by a part service company to be a delivery boy. And for a week or so, I had a motorcycle, which I loved. Then I got promoted to a pickup truck, which I loved. I rode that thing all over. They had customers everywhere. And so I'd come in the morning, pick up my stuff, and I was gone most of the day delivered. Free as a bird. One day, Mr. Ray McClure, my boss, called me and said, how would you like to work on our new IBM bookkeeping system? I've forgotten what they call the thing that day. Yeah. He says it'll mean a little more money to you. Okay, I'll go with that. Well, in a nutshell, part service had something like 20,000 individual parts. Now, I'm talking about every spark plug of every size had a part number. Every fan, anything you can imagine. It was about 20,000 as I recall it. And they were using a new system that IBM had just designed. Tremendous thing, bigger than several rooms there. And each part had to be given a number. 5, 6, 7 digits. I don't exactly remember. My job was to take the tickets that the men wrote up at the counter every day and put a part number on each thing that they sold. The next day, I didn't have anything to do with this, but I knew what was going on. The next day, the tickets that I had marked would go to a lady over here, and she was a key punch operator. And she would punch that information into a little cardboard card about like this, and it just made a series of punches in that card. And then another lady sitting on the other side of her, who was called a verifier, would do exactly the same thing. So that if an error was made, you caught it right there. Because one digit, you might be selling an automobile instead of a spark plug. So that was a very important part of it. We thought it was miraculous, the way that thing worked and the way it enabled them to keep up with inventory and so forth, and it was.
And it was actually a machine. It was a machine.
It was a series of machines.
Okay.
But once you got these cards punched, you had big trays of cards, hundreds of cards, and you let the machine run through that. And it by lights, I think, could read through these numbers, and through these punches, and it put the right number down. It said, okay, you sold PG-15's all-light spark plug or something like that. And
now again, about 1943.
that was in the early 1940s.
Over
yeah,
50 years
yeah.
ago.
That business was booming then because World War II had just begun, and they were doing a lot of business with the military.
They didn't actually call it a computer.
No, it wasn't called a computer. I can't remember. I think it was an IBM business machine. Isn't that what they used to call them, honey?
Well, that would be IBM.
Yeah, but anyways, it was IBM. And there wasn't anybody with IBM in the business at that time. And it was a tremendous machine, had to be cool, had to be exactly the right temperature, so it had to be heated and cooled within the parameters, of very narrow parameters that you had there, and shut up in an office all by itself. It was a big deal.
Ooh, that is.
A big deal.
And it, for my somewhat semi-literateness in regards to computers, you and the ladies were, in a sense, programming the computer?
No programming. All I was doing was putting a code number on every item that Part Service sold. And that would take me all day long. And it was, it wasn't a thrilling job, but I was seeing all this going on around me, and I got real interested in what, and then the reports could be printed with this information on which tomorrow sometimes you know every item you sold yesterday, and you knew what to order, how many of them to order.
Before it was all by hand.
All by hand, yeah.
The beginning.
Mr. Ray McClure was one of the very early users of the technology, and in all honesty, he got carried away, and the war ended, and the Part Service Company went busted because they had, at least one of the reasons being, they had so much money involved in computers, and they didn't need them anymore. And at that time, he formed his own, what's called then, a service bureau, and he took his computers and he put them in an office, and then he would contract with businesses around town to do their bookkeeping on their computer. And I had another experience with the computers before I get to what I'm fixing to tell you about. 1953 or something like that, I was on the United Way, I was on the Rotary Board of Directors, and United Way wanted to do a youth survey of all the young people in Montgomery County. And so the idea, and somebody knew that I had had something to do with this sort of thing. That's the only reason I can figure that I got on this at all. I ended up being chairman of the committee to develop a questionnaire for all the students in Montgomery County. Then we had to figure out a way to tabulate it. So John Prim, who was the IBM executive at that time, pulled all kind of strings, and we got IBM to furnish us with a census, a computer that had been designed for